Hi everyone, this is the Fly Culture Podcast and I'm your host, Pete Tigis. More years ago than I can remember, I was embarking on my path, my advanced instructor exams. I sat next to someone and we got speaking. We've been friends ever since. He is one of the most talented casters I know. He's someone who, when he does something, does it properly. He was one of the first people I knew to chase mullet with a fly rod and has recently worked on developing a fly line that I'm looking forward to hearing more about. I'm pleased to welcome Lee Cummings along to the podcast. Lee, great to have you along, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Pete. Thanks for having me, mate.
Absolute pleasure. I know we caught up on the river the other day. We had a nice phone conversation and I love chatting with you, and listeners will get a sense of this as well because we put the world to rights on many levels, and I really enjoy the phone conversations with you down the years and have enjoyed casting with you, fishing with you. I remember a tiny little stream we fished in Cornwall. Do you remember that one?
I do, mate. I do. Yeah, good times.
Yeah, they were fantastic. So what else have you been up to?
At the moment, we have been, as far as like competitions is concerned, do you want to talk about competition casting or fishing or what?
We talk about everything here, so you can, go off on competition casting. We were going to talk about that, so tell us a little bit about it and what you're up to. Are you planning something right now?
Well, basically, what we do now, since we hosted the 2018 World Championships here in the UK, we're now responsible for hosting the UK Championships, and that's a bi-yearly event. And basically, what that does is that gives an opportunity for potential casters in the UK to come along and basically lay down a score and qualify for the team.
That sounds really exciting. And I know this is another classic example of you picking something up by the scruff of its neck and working incredibly hard to make everything happen. Also, for listeners, there is obviously this casting world and from distance, accuracy, everything else that goes with it. But listeners may not know about these sorts of competitions. Can you tell us a little bit about what's involved with them?
Yeah, basically, it was formed initially by the Norwegian Casting Federation, and they started the World Championships up, and it was based around the use of fly fishing equipment. So historically, you had casting events where people were using like lead lines, or tungsten lines, and they wanted a more like reel to fishing competition, if you will. So, all these 6 events are all done with floating lines. There's 2 spear casting events, one with an 18-foot rod where you're on a platform, one with a 15-foot rod where you're wading thigh depth. And that one is a combination of your best left hand up single spear and right hand up single spear. So you've got to be ambidextrous there rather than just a one-side wonder. And then there is a trout distance event where you must use the scientific angler's expert distance line, which is typically the 5 weights, but you can use any rods to drive that line with. There is also a sea trout distance event where they're casting with a 27-gram shooting head, typical of something that you might fish with, out in the salt, so to speak. Then the salmon overhead, which is a 55-gram shooting head, and then there is trout accuracy, where you're casting into the 4 targets in order to score the highest points. I can assure you, one of the World Championships that I went to, I actually got the honour to meet Steve Rajeff, and these targets are set out. There's 3 rings, so it's 5 points for the centre ring, 3 points for the middle, 1 point for the outer. Okay, so Steve set off, and you go around 4 targets 4 times. So 5, 5, 5, 5, 20 points. 5, 5, 5, 5, 40 points. So the maximum is 80, okay? So Steve went up, 5, 5, 5, 5, round 1, 5, 5, 5, 5, round 2, 5, 5, 5, 5, round 3, 5, 5, 3, 5. And he was so annoyed, so annoyed that he missed that second to last target. I mean, his score was 78 points, and I think someone else got a perfect round in one of the championships since. But I always remember that, and I just thought that is just like, the level, the absolute upper echelons of skill and ability to hold your nerve in that environment and pull off a performance like that was just absolutely outstanding.
Absolutely. I remember going to a show in Birmingham when it used to be there, it may still be, just to watch Steve Ray Jeff cast.
Yeah.
And then the thing, I've probably mentioned it on here over the years as well, that I remember afterwards, I was in the hotel room, so I was staying over, and Nick and I were sharing a room, and we looked out the window and there was a lake there, and he just went out and did some casting and played around with that, which I thought was super cool. But tell me about this competition then. Does that mean that you can enter either aspects of it? So could you, let's say, just enter the accuracy part of it, or do you aggregate them as well so that there could be a champion of champions that does all of them? And how do you put it together?
It's basically, you can do whichever event you want. Obviously, in your class, there's men, women, veteran men, and veteran women, and typically each nation is allowed 8 casters per event. So theoretically, we could have 8 out and out accuracy specialists men, 8 out and out accuracy specialists women. And then the same for veteran men and veteran women. So you can see that your team would actually be quite big if it panned out like that. But I'm not going to say it's a niche sport. I think it's certainly increasing in popularity, and a lot more people are asking about it now. But with regards to your question, with what we do, we offer an overall champion trophy. Which is done through UK Flycasting Sport, which is the organisation I put together for the 2018 World Championships. And basically, so if you win the 18-foot spear, you get 1 point. If you win the 15-foot spear, you get another point. If you come second, you get 2. Obviously, the guy or the lady with the least amount of points at the end of the tournament, which is normally run over 3 days, takes home the overall champions trophy. Although you don't have to win everything in order to get that, We've had one clean sweep, and that was done by my good friend Blaine Lyon, who was, I think he was 19 or 20 years old at the time, and he beat everybody hands down all weekend in every event. He cast out of his skin, did the lad, and so he took home the trophy.
And you say World Championship. Does that mean there's going to be lots of countries turning up for these sorts of events? How many countries typically turn up?
Well, it does vary depending on the location. Excuse me. At the one that we organised in 2018, because I was talking about it for quite a long time, and it was actually the 3rd attempt to get it to the UK. I tried in 2014, 2016, never happened. 2018, it finally did. And the reason why I wanted it to come to the UK is because the venue where I train, and spiritually is now where the UK team is based, is down at Port Havrig, where the wind is constant all day. Okay. Now, I've gone to venues before in different World Championships, and literally, like, the guy before you could have a tailwind, and then when you step up, you're faced with a zero wind, or even in your face. Now, in an event where, like, every half metre counts, and you're casting against the best in the world, well, then ultimately you want everything to go your way. You want the tailwind or at least it to be fair. And the whole thing with bringing it to, like I said, bringing it to Port Havrig was, I did say from day one, this was going to be the fairest World Championships, because I'd been to 3 or 4 others, I can't remember now, where luck was never on my side. Always ended up in the crap lane, if you will, or always ended up with the poor conditions, as did many others, And I think based on that promise, that attracted a lot of people, and we had 123 casters from 20 nations come to Port Havrig. And as far as I'm aware, it's quite possibly the largest casting competition in living memory to being carried out. And yeah, I think maybe 10 to 15 nations would be there or thereabouts. But yeah, we managed to draw in, people from Japan, Australia, you name it, they came. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
That's, I'm sure, in large testament to yourself as well, because I know how driven and how focused you are, as I said in the introduction, when you take something on. I watched from afar as you were putting this together, and that is big kudos for that. I wanted to ask you, for listeners as well, so that they can get a sense of, let's look at, for example, the trout distance. Putting in perspective, and I know over the years, I would love if I could put this up, the photo of when you came down to stay at the weekend and we cast, and I look a broken man. We cast all day, late into the night, and we against the tape measure, because, and again, I've mentioned it on here in the past, that people think, well, they've cast the full fly line, that's 90 foot plus a leader. That's not really the case, and it's probably, I've not done it for a while now, but it's probably 70, 75 feet, if that.
Yeah.
I would be my guess anyway. And to put that into context, when you're against the tape measure and you're casting 5 weight distances, what are those sort of distances people like yourself are reaching for these occasions and events?
My best in competition in the 5 weight was 42.5 metres. The current world record, I think, is it 44.5 metres? Again, done to these ICSF rules. I think different countries do their own events to different rules, and they allow different lines as well. But excuse me. Yeah, I think ultimately it's if you're getting over 40 metres, you're certainly becoming competitive. I mean, once over, it was 36.5 metres, 120 feet, which is the length of the scientific angles, the distance line. But now you've got to cast that and some to get anywhere close.
That's pretty impressive. And does that also mean, we know the fly line, and I've got one around me somewhere behind me, but does that mean that rods are designed for that particular? I know spey rods have in the past, but are there single-handers now that are designed primarily just for these sorts of events? And do you think if so, that they've contributed to these extra distances, or is it techniques as well that have gone alongside it?
I think it's more the fact that the federation allows you to use any classification of 9 foot rod maximum. So most people are actually turning up with an 8 or 9 or a 10 weight. Yeah. Basically, when you've got that full line aerialized, I don't know the exact weight. It escapes me, but it actually bends a 10 weight rod quite well. Historically, I think when me and you were casting, Pete, down at yours, we were using the 5 weight Sage TCR, which was probably, those were the rules we were playing to in those days, because we were trying to emulate the best of the West competition. Again, that Ray Jeff and them used to compete in. and it was with the 5-weight sage. But like I say, they've opened it up now, and yeah, you can use any rod you want as long as it's no longer than 9 foot in length. And I think that suits some people's style, in so much as they can power it harder or whatever. But yeah, and in some cases, it might make the whole thing a little bit more predictable as well with regards to the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And when is this all taking place?
Well, the UK Championships now will be next March, because we have the World Championships this year. It's going to be in Sweden this year. Myself, unfortunately, and Angela will not be attending this time, but we'll see where it's going to go in another 2 years' time after that, and then we'll reconvene and decide then.
And does that mean then, is there a squad that's picked? Is there a criteria for that? Is there is it on the back of the events that you've put together, or is there a team picked, or is it purely on turning up and getting a great result?
No, what we've done since day one, because we knew that the 2018 Championships was going to be a big one, and the UK team would be largely represented. I actually hosted. Oh wow, here we go. I actually hosted 20 qualifying events over, I think it was 5 months. So basically, every weekend or every 3 days off that I get, 7 days after my weekend off, I was doing a qualifying. I was basically hosting a qualifying event and inviting people to come and cast. And we started off with just a basic league table, and obviously once the numbers reached more than 8 per event, people then started to be faced with a knockout situation. So they're having to come back and re-up their score, and like it took a long time. It took a hell of a long time to put all this together, and like I say, a lot of effort, but we've kept the scores since day one, and they're all available on UK Flycasting Sports. So if you look at the league table there, some of those scores do go back to those qualifying rounds, because they were yet to be beaten by that certain caster, so to speak. So yeah, that's how we do it. And if obviously the top 8 in any given event get first opportunity to go to the World Championships, yeah, and if some, let's say Blaine Lion 2 comes along and starts knocking it. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. His younger brother Beck, he's one to watch out for. If someone like that comes along and starts knocking all the scores out the park, then if you're in 8th place, you want to be considering your ambition with regards to, competing at world level. And obviously the right thing to do is to come to the UK Championships and better your performance from last time. No, I was going to say, so it's all done fairly, factually, and hopefully with the best level of consistency and accuracy. No results have been slipped, nothing's been missed or whatever. Everyone can see. Anyone who's interested can see where they are and what they need to do to safeguard themselves.
That's really cool. And I think for people listening, I would suspect turning up at these sorts of things, you're going to learn a hell of a lot about casting from people like Lee and others, and about yourself and your casting as well. And the sense I always get from these events, that it's more camaraderie. Although it's a competition, I get a sense it's camaraderie first and foremost, really, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, because we're getting to a stage now where, a lot of that huge team that we pulled together in 2018, a lot of those people have decided not to continue on anymore, or for whatever reasons. And what we're left with now is basically a closer unit. I always looked at the Norwegians and the Swedes. They have that camaraderie. They've had it for a lot of years, and I envied that a lot, in so much as, they were all sharing information. So-and-so was trying out this line, and so-and-so was trying out that line, and collated the results, and that's how they've ended up with such a high ranking team, because they give more than they all give more than what they take. And thankfully, we are starting to seriously come together like that now. And hopefully one day we'll be just like those guys.
Fingers crossed for that. So, folks, you can go. We'll get the details from Lee at the end, but perhaps it's worth having a look at this and seeing if you fancy giving this a try as well. Like I said when we were talking off mic, Lee, that we do tend to go off route a little bit. But it's kind of nice from that point of view, because I much prefer the conversation flows naturally as a result of it. But I would love to, I think people are probably getting a sense of your drive, determination, and we'll come on to the skill as well at some stage as well. But for listeners, you said where the competition are based. But for listeners, can you tell us where you were based and what that means from a fishing perspective too?
Okay. So I've lived in Cumbria all my life, and currently based in a town called Millen, which is in between Barrow-in-Furness and Whitehaven on the West Cumbrian coastline. Thankfully, I have quite a good choice. I have quite a lot of fishing around me. I don't capitalise on all of it, but I do believe that certain aspects of it lend themselves better than others at various times of year. We have all the spate rivers, such as the ones that you folks used to fish: the River Esk, the River Ert, the River Dudden, the River Ian. They don't have massive prolific numbers like any other river has suffered the consequences of time when it comes to salmon, but there are fish to be had when conditions are right. Again, living on the coastline, then it's an absolute no-brainer for me to do saltwater fishing as well. And also there is lots of like high-level tarns which contain the wild brown trout that I know that you like to chase after as well, Pete. So yeah, pretty fortunate, to be fair. Pretty fortunate.
It sounds like you're in a great position. I wanted to move on to mullet shortly, but I've seen that more and more people, and I'm somebody who goes to Denmark every year, once or twice, sometimes if I'm lucky, to go chase sea trout on the coast. Have you detected that? Have you done a little bit of that from where you're based as well? Do you see that there's potential for that? Is it something you thought about, perhaps?
It is something that I do. The window of opportunity is, again, fairly small. And it's took a lot of time to piece this together. I've not had anybody come down and say, that's where they normally are, or this is the time of year you need to go. These are the best tides. It's the amount of 20 quids that I've threw away in the petrol tank just to go home and just to, go up there and have a go and then come back and think, what have I learned, or what was that? Something just piece together these puzzles very, very slowly, piece by piece. But I can finally say that I'm reasonably confident now when it comes to sea trout in the sea, and that was always my ultimate goal, because I started sea trout fishing quite early on in my fly fishing career, if you will, and naturally you get drawn further and further downriver, particularly when you have freedom to go downriver, and then ultimately you end up finding yourself ratcheting around in estuaries and open coast. So that's how that all started. It was the sea trout that led me there.
I remember the conversation we first had, and I said, when we first sat next to each other at Caberis, I think it was, and I said, what do you fish for? And I remember you saying sea trout, and I guess you were still probably in the rivers then. But what have you learned from the coastal side of things? And do you think, mullet was a wonderful example of you going off to figure stuff out, and this is really pre-internet in any meaningful way,
Yeah.
that you were out figuring these things out. Was it similar for you? And again, this is sort of testament to the sort of person that you are, that you go out, figure the whole thing out, and then just sort of work on it quietly and do your own thing. And that's how you roll, really, isn't it? These things.
Yeah. I mean, any fly angler worth his salt cannot deny the excitement when faced with, a shoal of fish out in open water. And like, in them days, I made the same mistake. Everybody will do. It's like, are those salmon? Are those sea trout? And you just didn't know. And no matter what you put over them, they just wouldn't take. And then, eventually you come to learn that, these things are mullet, and supposedly they're notoriously difficult to catch. So, that was again just another distraction that I stumbled upon from following the sea trout down, if you will. And to be honest with you, like, given the state of things, like with regards to the salmon and the sea trout, which is up and down as we know, mullet seem to be the only consistent species year after year. The marks change with the winter storms, and they may make things more difficult, or they may make things more easy. But the fish, they're not sought after the same, like all the others. So although they can be frustratingly difficult at times, it's nice to go out and see that there is some wildlife out there still.
Yeah, and I remember the seaweed fly that you came up with that were marabou, and I tied some of those and have tried those over the years. And those moments when it clicks into place with something like that. And again, like you said, it wasn't easy to shout about what you were doing because you were quietly going about it and making it work. But was it a pleasing moment when you suddenly started? And I remember you talking about going down fishing with 5 weights, all those sorts of things that are well documented. And you were doing this quite some time ago. But when that clicked in, and fly patterns, for example, were you sort of, as I said, I just touched on the seaweed fly that you came up with, but other patterns as well. Were you sort of taking something from each trip and thinking, right, well, I need to refine this, I need to change this? How was that for you, and how was it when it actually clicked into place and started to work too?
Well, I think one of the biggest moments was, it was a fish that I caught on Havrig Beach as the tide was coming in, and I have a lot of respect for all the fish that I've caught over the years. Yeah, and trust me, the absolute majority of them have always gone back. But this one mullet I wanted to see, and what I'd been eating and everything else. So actually, this gentleman came along with his wife, and he said, are you going to eat that? And I said, no. And I said, well, we'll eat it. And I said, are you sure? And they're like, yeah, we'll eat it. And I said, okay. So I said, I'll kill the fish, but I want to examine its stomach contents first. And you've probably seen the photo. I remember the photo. It was on the old website, full of Corophium volutators, the mud shrimp, that were like still alive and writhing around in this mullet's stomach. That led me to a conversation with Gary Coxon, and he said about a gentleman who he knew at the time. It was obviously Malcolm Greenhouse. And Malcolm got in touch and said, I studied them when I was doing my whatever paper it was at university back in the day. And he told me all kinds of things about them. And he said, specifically, like, there's certain beaches that they favour, certain conditions. And so that was like one large key, if you will, to the puzzle, because that's what these things are eating, and almost exclusively on that beach as well. So yeah, it was just a case then of messing around with patterns that satisfied me, I don't think too much of it has to be that clever. I think the fly just has to be fished properly in order for it to work with mullet. So that was cool. But I will say that if I ever take somebody out and I just want them to get a fish, we live in this age of expectation, don't we? And yeah, everybody expects value for money. I've no qualms in fishing with bread and bread flies because it teaches the person to follow instructions. A lot of people find it difficult to completely dead drift a fly at range. The setup that I use is basically like float fishing. You've got a massive deer hair indicator on the top, and New Zealand style off the bend, a slow sink rabbit fur fly. And the aim is simple. You throw your bread in, those mullets start feeding, but bear in mind this is in a moving current as well. Get your fly in amongst that bread, but make sure that your fly does nothing else apart from drift downstream like that bread. Any drag in there, and you're not going to get any takes all day. Yeah, so I've had people like cast and then slowly walk down because they couldn't manipulate the line properly, or to just get the fly to dead drift properly. And they've had fish that way. It's just like one of the only ways they could do it. But yeah, it teaches you a lot of things. And when you mix that scenario, so you've got current, and the fish are coming in, but you're also, it's where the current meets the sea. Then you've got surf coming the other way as well. So this is ultra complicated now. You're trying to cast across the current, trying to stop it from dead drifting, trying to stop the waves from smashing it all about, and the mullet are going crazy, and they're quite easy to catch as long as you do everything right. But it's just at those points, and it can get to a point where like maybe 3/4 of an hour in the water, and then you need to be out for 10 minutes just to let your mind slow down because there's just that much going on. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Love it. And coming back to, you said when we were talking about the shrimp patterns, I'm sure people are zoning in on this as well, that you said fishing the fly properly there. Did that also mean from a drag-free drift as well, or are you manipulating the flies? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You see these. Excuse me, Pete. You see these Carophium and the way they behave. They're crawling around looking for the little holes for the females that are in there. Yeah, and typically what I was told was that at full tide, that's when they will come out, and then you'll see them. And then as the tide starts to recede, these things are getting swept back, and they're trying to get back in. And I watch the fish as they come in with the tide, and they'll appear on these, what I call the mud flats, if you will. It's not like going to Cuba or somewhere posh and nice like that. You're talking, this black, horrible, silty stuff. And the fish will be over there, make their way into the river as it then fills and backfills. Seem to like lounge around and play around in there at full tide, but then gone and back over to the mud flats, if you will. And that's when you see them with the tail fin sticking up, with the heads down, and they're in there like grubbing away. So yeah, it makes no sense to have something that's on the top in those situations, but something that's fairly low down that will just bumble along with the tidal current, so to speak.
Are you setting up with a New Zealand dropper for that, with the shrimp on the point and a buoyant fly, or are you just letting it drift naturally? And have you found that this works for all species of mullet, or is there a particular one that you're targeting?
Right. So around here, we only get, to my knowledge, because I've never caught anything else other than the wise and old thick-lipped grey mullet. We don't get these little thin lips or golden greys. And so I can't comment on if it would work for all species because I'm yet to catch the other two. Like I say, the fish around here are your 10 plus years old, thick lip mullets, which, I would invite any southern mullet specialist to come and have a day up here and let's see if their techniques would work up here. Yeah, against these fish. I mean, I've had lads, good anglers out with me, and who have been successful, but it had not been easy for them. They had to switch on to a lot of things quite quickly, and but with regards to the setup in that situation, no, I wouldn't fish a buoyant fly, and then because the depth's always changing, it's got to be something that's going to get down but still be able to roll around on the bottom, so that's the thing there.
Nice. And no retrieve, just dead drifting?
Just let it go. Yeah, just let it go. Just fish just off tension. And this is where I like to use, historically I've liked to use shooting heads, where I can use some thin backing line, which basically I can just feed out nice and carefully without disrupting the organisation of the head, which I want just off tension, but you want it so that it's there. You instantly feel something.
Nice. Good tips. And like I say, everyone, Lee was doing this a long time ago, and the sea trout as well. And we'll get his contact details at the end if you want to come out and chase mullet with him if you're in the Cumbria region as well, which I think you'll learn a lot from. And I'm sure, again, by listening today, you'll get a sense of Lee's thought process and things and how everything is incredibly well researched. And I love that approach to it. I'm not necessarily that way, but I can learn from what people like yourself are saying about the process that you've gone through on many levels of fishing. So I applaud that. I want you to move on a little bit now and reminisce again. I guess as we get a little bit older, we like to reminisce. Do you remember getting up at whatever it was, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to practice on the day of our casting exams? That was pretty cool, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And we went through that process together because, like you said at the start, it was you who got chatting as we were both nervously awaiting our time. And it was something, Pete, it was a bloody great thing to go through. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm still proud to this day to be a member. I think it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life with regards to an investment in myself, with regards to self-improvement, being able to share, experience, meeting other people. It was just we passed it at a good time. I also believe that too. But I do fondly remember there was three of us. There was me, you, and there was Mark Bailey, and we went to the opposite side. This was on the River Tay, actually, up in Kenmore. And we were furiously practicing our 90-degree single spay, which was always the bogey cast. And I can't remember who it was who looked up, but Gary Coxon was stood there looking out of his hotel window with just his white fronts on, and I thought, oh, we've been spotted. Maybe we'll get some bonus points for that, for being out early, and we would show some dedication for sure. Yeah, but it was a great feeling, and I can remember how happy you were when you passed, and I'm sure you remember how happy I was, and Mark was the same as well. It was a great time. It really, really was.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it. I think Brett was there too.
Yeah.
We shared a room, and we've been, like yourself, firm friends ever since. And I remember when I passed the thing, that night when we went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I was so wired
Yeah.
because 6 months of my life had been put, probably longer than that, to that
Yeah.
moment. And I think I said recently with the podcast I did where I had Carl as a guest, who actually was one of the people who examined me for that test, that I think any other day I'd have probably failed it because I was so hyped up about this thing. But it was just everything went into place perfectly for that moment. So it was pretty special. You've got on to good and great with double-handed exams. You're a master instructor and have done so much with it. Do you enjoy that process of, we've talked and touched on the guiding aspects of what you do, but the casting clearly from the competitions is incredibly important to you, but also from an instructor perspective, is that important to you too?
Absolutely. I one of the most fortunate things that happened to me also was meeting Paul Arden through his website Eclipse, and he kind of when I first joined, he kind of how do I put this? Put the feelers out on me. He said, "So what's this cast?" And it was an off-shoulder single spare, but it was preceded with a snap tee, an aerial snap tee, right? Okay. What's this one? So he's sending me all these videos, and I'm telling him exactly what they are. And so we're hitting it off straight away, having a good crack. And I learned pretty quickly that there's the guys that were on there at the time were not being abrasive, but they were challenging the level of instruction that was around at that time. The rod is a spring. These kind of statements that instructors of the time were saying, and there was guys on there who had like high speed video cameras. This my friend's Dr. Grund Lohal from Norway. He had this set up in this gym, and he had this world class caster casting a 5-weight, and he's there videoing it in however many frames per second you could have back in those days, and he's analysing this cast, and he came up with some figures like the line had actually achieved 83% of its final speed. At the time, the rod was fully bent, so it only gave up an extra 13%. So is the rod a spring? It was just like, and I was just fascinated by all this stuff and getting heavily involved in these debates. And what I learnt off those guys again was just unbelievable, because I would go back, or I could listen to other instructors and quietly get a good feel for how much they actually knew about the casting, and think, maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, or he's just saying that because they've always said that, or whatever. But I just found the whole process absolutely fascinating to learn about the mechanics. And yeah, some of the physics is way over my head anyway. So you don't go there in the field with a client, because that approach simply will not work. But it's nice to have the information if a potential instructor comes to you and wants to talk about that sort of thing, because I believe it's important that it's your responsibility as an instructor, especially as an AAP guy instructor, to be seen and heard, to be saying the right things. So that was whole part of that journey, so to speak.
And again, for listeners, they're getting a real sense of you about that I said in the introduction, that when you go into something, you go into it properly, to the best of, you try and understand something, the best of your ability. And while I've got you here, what is the one piece of advice you would give to listeners about their casting that would improve their casting? What's the one tip that you think? And then I'm going to ask you a supplementary question for somebody who wants to add a little bit more distance to their cast too.
If you don't do it already and you're struggling with your casting, watch your back cast. That should fix a good number of things straight away, because the way I teach, you may or may not have seen this, but I use this triangle method for teaching, where I lay out a triangle on the floor, and it's the same. I've used it. It must be 20 years now, and it's not that I've stopped learning. I would never go down that. I would never go down that thing of belief. But this method isn't broke yet, so it doesn't need fixing. And what I do is, it's important when people come to me that I put them at ease and give them that confidence thing instantly. One thing I can't stand personally is, and you see it a lot at various shows or whatever, someone stood there looking completely uninspired, getting smashed to bits by trying to do a roll cast. A roll cast is actually quite difficult. People say, "Oh, it's just flick it forwards and stop it high." Yeah, that essentially is that. But to go from roll casting to overhead casting is a different thing altogether. But a roll cast only gives you a certain percentage of the weight available, which is quite a tricky thing to. It's quite a tricky thing to attain. So I get people false casting in under a minute generally, and I like this approach because it installs confidence, it installs belief, and it reassures the clients that what I'm saying to them works. So they listen. I get them on side very, very, very quickly. And quite often, just to see people enjoying themselves that quickly, I think it's winning already. It's winning already. This is another one. Another one's set on that path now of enjoyment. I don't do the hold the rod while they hold the rod. Oh, that really boils my blood when I see that, because I've had it done to me. It wasn't particularly enjoyable at all. I felt of the cast. I felt absolutely nothing. I learnt nothing, and I just thought, get off me. It was just nah. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I like the contactless way of teaching, which the triangle method offers. It became more important 2020 onwards, when we're all keeping distance and things like that. But you shouldn't have to get that close to somebody, and fly casting should not take two people in order to be able to do it. That's the top and bottom of it. So that's why I teach that way.
Nice. And it's interesting for me that you said you get people false casting. So I've talked about it on here a number of times. And if anyone's listening who's instructing as well, that I found personally, and I've not taught for a few years now, but I found, don't run through all the tackle, don't do all that stuff. It just loads people up, get a rod in their hands, get them comfortable, and then teach them something simple, like you say, to build up the confidence. It's so much easier to do that because they're trying to hang on to everything that you're saying, and they've probably forgotten the important stuff because what rod did I need? I was going to fish a string. Is it a 9-foot or is it a 10-foot? Oh, I can't remember now. And so if you can strip that stuff out, so even if there are instructors listening who are doing that, try it without making it too complicated. Don't give people information overload. Just let them get the rod in their hands and have a go. And as I said, it may well have moved on a fair bit since I've been doing it, but we found personally that worked for our little fishing school incredibly well.
Yeah. I think also that method was honed in at the the Kelso shows that we used to do with the app guy. Because if you remember, I don't know if you went or not, Pete, but there was something like 400 school children who were coming as part of this experience that Eon Fairgate was putting on for them at the show, where they got to do the entomology, various aspects of fishing, and one of them was casting. And we had like, was it 5 or 10 minutes with each child? And you could see the ones that were with somebody who was basically saying, like, I'm going to do a roll cast. And they're like smashing the rod into the casting pond or flicking it behind them and not listening to instructions. But the ones that came and were with me, I did the triangle thing with them straight away. Let's just move the rod tip in a straight line, in a theoretical, we've got to say theoretical this day and age, straight line, and just get this line off the ground, and they were casting backwards and forwards. They didn't want to put it down. The kids went away smiling. I thought, you're winning. It's working, and it's the same. I give the same procedure, whether it's a young child that a friend wants me to teach, like it might be son or daughter. Yep, they'll do the triangle method, or it's an old lady or whatever. They all get the same thing, and it works. So yeah, I got to stick with that.
Nice. Like your style. Let's move on to fly lines, and it's as no surprise that you have worked with fly lines and you have a new one about to hit the market, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about it, about its applications, and about how it came about and who you're working with?
Certainly. So the line is going to be manufactured by a relatively new company, a UK-based company called Celestial Fly Lines. And the gentleman behind that is my friend, Steve Parks. Steve Parks is actually one of our casting team members. And he has set about on this journey because he's created a machine at his premises, and he's been supplying the UK team with these new fly lines that we all wanted that weren't available on the market, so to speak. Just various length of shooting heads for the sea trout or the salmon distance event, new spare lines for the 18-foot event or the 15-foot event. And obviously Steve's branching out now into fishing lines as well of his own design. But there was one particular hole which needed filling, and it's now going to be sorted because I had the crack with Steve and said, would you make this for me? And thankfully he agreed. So what I wanted, the purpose for the creation of the Eclipse fly line, which is what it's going to be called, the Eclipse, the purpose was twofold. Firstly, to share with all fly anglers an opportunity to own an easy casting, high performance fly line, which handles both overhead and spare casting scenarios with outstanding efficiency, thanks to the carefully considered head length and taper profiles. Secondly, to provide a solid go-to line solution for potential casting instructors who are looking to take on any of the current fly casting qualifications worldwide. This line is perfect for active instructors who wish to make the teaching of fly casting as easy and as fun as it should be. Now, I'm sorry if I read that there because that's a statement I come pre-prepared to make sure that I said everything right. But basically, I've spoken with other guys and they said, like, a client asks you, what line do I get? And we're struggling now to send people somewhere for something that they can get on with, right? You asked before about the biggest, one of the things that could easily improve most people's casting. Let me spin that question around, and I can tell you that I would say 95% of the problems are caused by people turning up with an incorrect fly line. Okay. And I'll go into this further on down the lesson. I want them on side first, so they get to use the outfits that I'll just see. Have a little flick with this, and you do that. Yeah. So I say, right, what you got? It's a so-and-so line. Okay. It's a 6-weight. Yep, spot on. What head length is it? Don't know. Right. Okay. So let's measure it. So I'll do this 6-foot arm span thing and feel for the running line. Okay, it's about 44 feet. So I've given the analogy of let me and you design a fly line each, and we'll start off with a 12-gram blob of plasticine each. Okay, stick them on the table. I'll roll mine out into a 30-foot arrowhead shaped sausage, and it's 30 foot and it's 12 gram. You'll roll yours out. You get to 30 feet, but then you keep going. You go 35, roll it out to 40. Oh, sorry, let's roll it out to 50. Let's go nuts. Yeah, and that shape you've created, he's going to take a picture of it, and that's what's obviously this is not how fly lines are made, but it's just a story to get the process across. And when the lines go to production, people say, well, this line casts better. This 12-gram, 30-foot line, I can get on with it dead easy. It carries large flies. It does this. It does that. The other line, people aren't getting on with it. It doesn't shoot. It doesn't do this. It doesn't do that. It's like, why is that? Because they can't deal with the 40-odd foot or the 50-odd foot of line that the head length is made from. So they do the sensible thing. They pull some line in that they can do, that they can handle backwards and forwards, false casting. But what's that done to the weight of the line? Beyond the rod tip. You've reduced it because it's inside the blank. You've also got thick head running through the rod rings. So not only have you got a lighter weight outside the rod tip, you're expecting that lighter weight to pull line out which is thicker than what it should be, because that should be outside the rod tip as well. So the biggest thing is people come and they have no concept of. A lot of people come, and they have very little concept of head lengths and why have they bought that line? Was it because it said extreme distance and presentation and on the box? Oh, I'll have a bit of that, yeah. Or was it because it was out of the £5 mill end bin and I got 3 of them for 15 quid? They just don't. Certainly the people I've taught, we're not paying enough attention to that aspect of it. So what I try and do is to get them to go away and be line savvy. Why do you want this line? Why do we need this line? At what level am I able to go up to one of these longer lines and benefit from using one of these longer lines? Yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty much where it's at. So with this celestial fly line, it's basically it's dead on a 7 because that's the maximum. Firstly, that's the maximum permissible line classification that you're allowed in the AAPGAI and in the FFI, I believe. So it's got to meet that. I don't want people turning around and saying you can't use that. It's an 8-weight. Cummings is behind it. You're not using it. Whatever. You've got to. So that was important. It's bang on it. It's bang on the target weight at 30 feet. The head is actually only 32 feet anyways. So there's a 2-foot handling section at the back, which is probably going to get the most hammer when you're teaching people just overhead casting and no hauling. Shove the 2 foot beyond and some overhang as your skill level increases, and obviously you need that for when you're learning the haul as well. But that off the back of all the spare casts that you're asked to do, it's not a difficult length to move around, even like 90 foot, these 90 degree off-shoulder single space, for instance. that need to go out X amount of distance. It works really, really well, both overhead and in spearcasting situations, as I said before. Some of the previous lines that I had, I mean, when I did my masters, I used the Lee Wolf nymph taper, which is like pretty much like a brick on string, but it's seriously rear weight biased. It went from like its thickest diameter to running line in literally no distance at all. And it made it quite funky when overhead casting. It would, the thick part of the head would hit the loop and everything would snap shut. But then it would the bottom leg would want to sag. So I had to really hold this line up in the air by, keeping hold of all tension possible to try and make this thing look passable. And yeah, obviously that was something that needed smoothing out into a line that you want to be able to do both. I mean, the nymph taper super excelled at spear casting, but it wasn't the best at overhead casting. This is a compromise between the two. So, yeah.
And to me, it sounds as though it has great fishing applications as well.
I think this will make a brilliant still water workhorse. As far as sea trout fishing goes, I'm of the belief that we're going to do two colours. There's the nuclear green, as we called it, and white, which tends not to offend anybody. I think it will make a good sea trout line just because it's that. It's obviously it's that kind of visibility, and if you wanted to put a black mark on it, so when the running line comes in at night time and you can see the black mark, it'll obviously appear as grey. Then you know that the head is in the correct position for casting, and you should be able to get some good consistency with that. I'm quite looking forward to taking it out and bashing some mullet with it in a couple of months. And yeah, same again with the sea trout and the bass. I don't particularly go heavyweight in saltwater stuff. I mean, I'd be quite happy to use. I'd use that line on my 5-weight TCR right the way up to my 8-weight one. To me, the rod numbers are just a reference point for experimentation, so to speak. And I think that 12.5 grams sits quite nicely on a high performance 5. Up to a reasonable action date. So that's the starting point, anyways.
Nice. And I'm looking forward to, you very kindly sent me one, and the wind, I'm looking out the window now. It looks like the wind, the latest storm, whatever it's called now. I think we've gone from A to Z just in spring in storms and everything else. So I'm looking forward to trying that out. And I was immediately thinking of, funnily enough, mullet when you said the applications for it as well, plus many others. The other thing as well, knowing you as I do, and I'm sure listeners are getting a sense now, this wouldn't be right. Well, let's design this occur. I would think this has been through a number of iterations for it to get through your incredibly high standards as well.
It's born out of frustration more than anything else, because like I said before, spoke to other instructor friends of mine and was saying, where are we sending people? What line are you sending people to? And the price of these things now, it's just getting absolutely ridiculous. I mean, 100 quid, 120 quid for a fly line that, a few years ago should have been 60, 70 tops. I think these are coming out at £55. So we want to, we want to rip people off, but it's a bloody good value. It's a bloody good value for what it is, basically.
Absolutely, that's a nice price point. And also, I've only sort of handled the line so far, but geez, that's a slick line, isn't it?
Yeah. Steve's done an amazing job in such a short space of time, getting all the things right that we know that need to be right. So, yeah, fingers crossed. Let's hope it flies.
Literally, and also UK company. So if we can get behind a UK company, I think that's really, really cool. So I'm going to ask you for some details in a moment. We're going to start winding things down a little bit now, Lee. We've spoken for over an hour, but you're a musician. If you follow Lee on social media, you'll know that he's been out touring and playing music. Fly Culture road trip playlist, whatever I call it, on Spotify. Can you give me a song for that, please?
Oh,
I know. You can have your own band if you like.
Oh, man. You've got me now, Pete. You've got me. Let me email it to you.
All right. Well, let's have one. Tell us about your band, the name of your band, and I'll choose one of the songs, or you choose one of the songs that your band. I assume your band's on Spotify, so give us one of your songs.
Right. One of the bands that I'm in is called Death Collector, and it was started by a drummer that I used to listen to when I was like 13, 14 years old. This guy was like the pioneer of the death metal scene. In his band, that was in them days called Bolt Thrower, a very, very famous UK death metal band, grindcore band. When he asked me to join Death Collector, I was like, I'm finally going to get to meet this guy, let alone being in a band with him. The whole thing was just completely mind blowing. So, yeah, I've managed to quell my inner fanboy in all the times that I've been in the band with him. But yeah, so we released the album last year, the debut album. The album was called Death's Toll, and if we was to pick a song off that, which was one of my favourites, I would choose Rearview Guilt.
Got you. I'm writing that one down now. Guilt, that's down. I will add that to the list very, very shortly. Lee, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. Before we go, can you tell us how people can get hold of you from a guiding and instructing standpoint, website, social media, those sorts of handles, and also where people can find one of these great value fly lines from?
Right. So I currently, I don't have a guided website, but I'm doing everything through UK Flycasting Sport. So my just simply email me at info@ukflycastingsport.com, whether that be for competition casting or tackle advice or the general questions that we normally get. And the fly lines, they're not available as of yet. They are currently being made as we speak. Steve did say hopefully within the next 2 weeks. So if you go onto Celestial Fly Lines website, or keep an eye out on the Facebook. Put it this way: when they're out, we'll certainly let you know. They'll be out on all the social media platforms, the Facebook, the Instagram, the usual ones, basically.
Fantastic. Well, best of luck with that. Keep doing what you're doing, buddy, because, again, I always shout about people who are trying to push the envelope a little bit, doing things the way they feel should be done at an incredibly high standard. And we're lucky that you're doing this and pushing things on and questioning and helping people as well. And I think this fly line will be a big help for both aspiring instructors, and fly anglers as well. So I wish you every success with that. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep rocking. Mate, it's been a pleasure to speak with you on the podcast today. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you, Pete. Much appreciated, mate. Much appreciated.
Everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. We've covered lots of ground as always. And as always, there'll never be any charge from these. It's just lovely to talk to people about fly fishing and share their passion and knowledge with you. So it's wonderful to be able to do that. Thank you so much for listening. There'll be another episode coming very, very soon.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.